Most of the time, when I play games, I either beat them once and stop there, or get all the achievements and then stop. But once in a while I do everything there is to do in the game and still want more. It happened with Metroid Zero Mission, it happened with Dark Souls, and about 3 weeks ago it happened with Shogun Showdown. And when something like that happens, I look into modding. Unfortunately, the mod selection for Shogun Showdown is limited to say the least, with a grand total of 8 mods. One of them is visual, 4 of them are cheats, one is a meme mod that replaces all enemies with dashers, and 2 mods that I was somewhat interested in. One that allows for selecting custom starting tiles, and an enemy randomizer. But, as it quickly turned out, custom starting tiles weren't all that fun, since for me the main appeal of it would be giving the enemy exclusive attacks a try. But pretty much every single one of them has serious problems. The barricade, for instance, even when spawned by the player, is still considered an enemy, so other enemies won't attack it. And a bomb explodes in the middle of the turn ending, which can completely break the game in at least 2 separate ways. And the enemy randomizer just didn't work on the current version of Shogun Showdown. But my disappointment didn't last long, because there were mods for Shogun Showdown, and they all used Unity Mod Manager, which meant that there was some kind of framework for modding, and that in turn meant that I could potentially learn how to make these mods myself. And I did. Within an afternoon, I had my first mod working. One that made the swirl attack also hit the user. And that was simple enough to do, so I thought, what's the harm in pausing my other projects for a week to see what I could make in that time. Then a week became 2 weeks, and 2 weeks stretched into the third one, before I decided that what I've got is good enough to showcase. And what I've got is Shogun Showdown Extras, a small mod that adds 9 new tiles, 8 new skills, and 2 new quests to the game. But to explain why adding so little took so long, we will have to look at how creating Unity Mod Manager mods actually works. This here is the code used in the first test mod that I made. It is using something called Harmony, which is a library that allows for altering the functionality of applications written in C#. How it works is that you define the class and function from the original code that you want to alter, then you write a prefix or postfix function, where prefix is called before the original function, and postfix is called after it, whenever the original would be called. In this case, the function I patch is just returning a simple array of cells that the attack targets. Normally it returns -1 and 1, meaning cells immediately in front and behind the attacker. My function sets the array to -1, 0, 1, meaning that it also targets the cell the attacker is in. Then it returns false, meaning that the original function is completely skipped. The result? Once I started the development proper, the first thing I wanted to add was a completely new attack. It was then I realized that modding this game will be like doing a murder investigation. So, okay, the attack occurred here. Where did the weapon used in it come from? If the shopkeeper has access to all player weapons the moment you enter the scene, when does he receive the list of them and how is it stored? Can we extrapolate based on this one single screenshot the exact pixel per unit value of icons? After a few hours of that, I actually started getting comfortable. I was more or less understanding how to dig through the original code to find the functionality I want, how to package and later load images so that the game actually understands them. When there were errors that caused the game to become slightly mangled, I knew where to look for the cause. All that resulted in an attack that worked exactly as intended. An unlockable tile that appears the same way as all others, and stabs the 2 cells behind you with a spear. Well, except for the fact that it was still using the regular spear attacks animation. But how hard could it be to just make the character turn around right before the stab? Very hard. Very hard is the answer. And the reason is one word: coroutines. If you're writing code for a Unity game, and you want something to happen with a delay, or with a wait in the middle, or in a loop that repeats every second, you will probably use a coroutine, with a set of instructions defined as an I enumerator. and when you're writing it, it's not much different from any other function. Things change, however, on compilation. My current understanding is that when the game assemblies are built, regular functions can still be accessed as they are, meaning that a mod can modify them fairly easily. Coroutines, however, are instead saved as a list of instructions in assembly. And if you don't know what that is, the simplest way to describe it would be that normal programming languages are made in a way that makes them easier for humans to understand. Assembly is a programming language made in a way that's easier for the computers to understand. Here's a comparison. So if you want to modify an enumerator, not just slap a bit of code before or after it, you have to write a function that will take the list of instructions in machine code, find specific places in it, and then add or remove instructions to get the desired effect, while being careful not to mess up the machine code specific elements, such as the variable stack or instructions with labels. The result is that a change that in the original function would mean adding 2 lines of code ends up looking like this. And after literal days of trying to figure it out, I was finally able to create a system for playing my own animations instead or on top of the existing ones. Also that the character could turn around while stabbing with a spear. And it still isn't even perfect. For some reason the spear moves a whole tile further back than it should, and I currently don't know why. And you would think that once I worked all that out in the very first tile I added, the following ones would be easy. And well, they were definitely easier. I of course had to learn some new part of the game's inner workings for each one, but I think it would be more interesting to talk about the inspirations for them. The bug spear was just the first easy sounding thing to make that came to my mind. The second was throw, because I noticed that 4 out of 5 of the playable character's special attacks have a tile counterpart that offers the same utility. Wanderer's Swap and Smoke Bomb can be used to swap places with the enemy in front of you, Ronin's Push and Dragon Punch push the enemy in front of you away, Shadow Phase and Shadow Dash pass through multiple enemies to reach an empty cell behind them, and Chainmaster's special ability is literally just Swap Toss down to the name. Jujitsuka's Throw was the only one without a counterpart, so I made one. And please ignore the fact that I managed to forget that she was the only one for long enough to also implement Wanderer's Swap as a tile. Another move I wanted to implement was a movement utility, something along the lines of a parting shot or backstep. A tool to reposition while damaging the enemy. And I eventually realized that what I was imagining was basically Nightjar Slash from Sekiro, a special move which can be used to strike the enemy while jumping away, or jump towards the enemy with a strike. Shogun Showdown's simpler input system doesn't exactly allow for selecting which of these variants you want to use on the fly, and I didn't want to split it into 2 tiles, so the way it works is that if there is an enemy directly in front of you, you hit them and then jump back, otherwise you jump forward and then strike. I also wanted to add an attack that would strike the target on the opposite side of the field, as I wanted a method of targeting that no attack used. And this one was already used by a non-damaging mirror tile. This ended up using the corrupted pillar effect that some boss attacks employ, which in turn meant that I not only had to learn how the game spawns them, but also modify them to be compatible with enchantments, and make their property where they heal bosses instead of damaging them optional. And yes, if you use this tile in the middle of the field, you will hit yourself. The remaining 4 tiles are all variants of existing tiles normally inaccessible to the player, that I added to fix the gripes I had with how they worked when given to the player directly. So Corrupted Wave, instead of having 2 variants of going left to right and right to left, instead starts from the direction where the player character is facing and moves towards them. It and Corrupted Explosion were made enchantments compatible, as well as capable of damaging bosses. Barricade spawns an object that is correctly tagged as being a player summon, and its health starts low but can be upgraded. And Bomb, well, Bomb was a peculiar case. I'm pretty sure that early on in development it was meant to be a tile available to the player, because it has a set cooldown, which no other enemy-only tile does, and while it's not set to be enchantable, if given an enchantment, it handles it correctly. So all I had to do was to make it possible to enchant it and make it appear as an unlock. and also fixed the game-breaking bug that it suffered from, where because it didn't wait for its attack to finish before announcing that it was done, it caused the turn order to get messed up. And if an enemy eliminated by the bomb happened to be corrupted, they could spawn a new enemy on top of the one that was placed by the wave spawner, or worse yet, spawn that enemy after the fight ended, which completely broke the game. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I decided I also wanted to add a set of skills. And where tiles were added on the principle of whatever I feel like whenever I come up with it, skills were all designed and implemented at the same time to add 2 of them to each shop. Ones like Adrenaline, which recharges your tiles when you take damage, or Triple Combo Shield, which is fairly self-explanatory, aren't really worth talking about. They were pretty much just filler, added because I didn't have any better ideas at the moment. Technician is literally just the Technician ability from Pokemon, making weak attacks deal more damage. And Defiant Might is just a reskin of the red Tearstone ring from Dark Souls, increasing damage at low HP. Though it is worth noting with this one that I made it so if you are at 1 hit point, it gives you the bonus damage regardless of your max HP, because otherwise it would be completely useless if you somehow ended up with 1 or 2 max HP. Lightning Combo was a pretty obvious counterpart to existing Chilling Combo and Combo Curse skills. The way it works is that if it targets an enemy who is alone, it just deals 1 damage to them, otherwise it creates the Shockwave enchantment effect on that enemy, dealing 1 damage to them and all adjacent enemies. If you get multiple of them, it's pretty fun to set up all enemies on low enough health for the skill to trigger itself repeatedly, clearing the entire screen. It would be great if the visual of the lightning strike, that already exists in the game, played at the positions of enemies hit by this skill, but that is one of those pieces of polish that I didn't have the time for. Swift Move was of course inspired by the Two-Face Dancer skill, which makes turning around a free action. Figuring out where to add the code that interrupts the normal turn order took some work, but wasn't that bad by itself. But then I decided to add a second skill that interacts with the turn order when executing a special move, and things got complicated. Because the correct way of implementing follow-up wasn't to run the special move normally, then execute attacks in the queue without ending the turn. It was instead to run the special move without ending the turn, then executing the attacks in the queue normally. As you may have noticed, Swift Move already causes the special move to run without ending the turn, and the order in which they activate, if you have both skills, depends on which one you bought first. And to figure out how to handle that, I had to draw a graph that defines how follow-up should behave, depending on the situation in which it was triggered. And the last of the skills is Bursting Shards. This skill was the first one I got when testing, and not only it sent me to the Shadow Realm once, it was an absolute nightmare to get it to work. At first, it didn't work because I implemented it wrong, not quite understanding the finer details of how the mods affect the game. After fixing that, it didn't work for seemingly no reason, and I spent hours trying to debug it, and slowly going insane when on multiple occasions I took code that didn't work and rewrote it into a different class where other code worked, and it suddenly started working. Then when I moved it directly to a new class, it didn't work again. I don't know why it didn't work for a long time, I don't know why it works now, and I am never touching it again. On the plus side, it's at least a fun skill to use, as much like the lightning combo skill, it can trigger itself. If multiple enemies have shields, breaking one of them will break all the others, triggering this skill on each one. An unexpected issue arose from the archive, because in the vanilla game, all the skills fit exactly on a single page, and so that tab of the archive doesn't have multi-page scrolling, meaning that I had to figure out how it's set up and implement it myself, and also do so exclusively through code, without the ability to simply edit the components in the scene or prefab. Once I decided that I'm done with tiles and skills, the last thing I wanted to add was custom quests, or rather quests, just to see how they work and give a small challenge to anyone who ends up playing with this mod. And the simplest one I was able to come up with was to beat the game using only tiles and skills added by this mod, which to my surprise turned out to be an actual challenge. In hindsight, it does make sense, of course. Out of the tiles I added, one doesn't deal damage, one damages you each time you use it, one relies on collision damage that you can't buff when going for this quest, 2 of them deal damage with a delay and a risk of self-damage, and 2 more have awkward targeting rules. That leaves only Nightjar Slash and Swap as the reasonably reliable options. And you have no guarantee that you'll get the 2 in a run. Add to it the fact that you can't get any of the vanilla skills that could mitigate some of these issues by increasing collision damage, increasing damage in general, or granting a shield more reliably than on a triple combo. And I ended up failing it multiple times when trying on day 7, eventually getting it by switching to day 1, simply because I couldn't justify spending that much time on testing if it works. But the mod also has a second quest, which I didn't originally intend to create, because during testing of Swift Move and Free Play, I ran into a situation where I killed the last enemy in the wave using my special move. So all enemies were gone, but because the turn hadn't ended, new ones didn't spawn yet. And, like a true programmer, I called that a feature and made an achievement out of it. It's worth noting that this mod is not necessarily finished. It probably could use some balancing and polish, but I'm done with it for now because I need to get back to Divine Dream and .NET Hack. But it's almost certainly not the only mod I'll make for this game. In these 2 and a bit weeks, I collected literally dozens of ideas. For new tiles, skills, enemies, elite enemy upgrades, tile enchantments, shops, shrines, heroes, a whole second week of added challenges, an extreme enemy and boss randomizer, everything I could port from Sekiro, Bloodborne style transforming weapons, because I like Souls-likes if you couldn't tell, an expansion to the core gameplay mechanics, and a freaking alchemy system. So there will be more Shogun Showdown content to come. If that's of any interest to you, subscribe so you won't miss it, and until next time, farewell.